What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Mutant XPerience Podcast. With me on this episode, a really special guest, a true OG of the fighting game community. We have Saber from Arizona. We've been talking about doing this for a while, and I'm
Yeah.
so happy that we were able to finally go ahead and learn a little bit more about your FGC career, but also get your thoughts on Third Strike, past, present, and future. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, man. It's great to be here. I definitely love doing this stuff. So happy to be here.
You and I don't know each other too well, Saber, and so we're gonna start off with some pretty basic questions. How did you get into video games?
So I've been in it since I first back I can remember when maybe like 3 or 4. I remember going to seeing the earliest arcade games like Space Invaders, Asteroids, all that stuff. My dad taking us to at the time it was like Showbiz Pizza before it was like became like Chuck E. Cheese and all that. That's this weird thing. But I remember that stuff, and then I remember my parents having an Atari VCS, and so did my neighbors who also had kids I was friends with. They had one as well, so I was always playing games all the time. So I was hooked on from a very early age.
So your introduction to video games was
Arcades,
primarily through
baby.
the arcade.
Arcades, baby.
Mm.
Arcades and the Atari VCS or the 2600. As some people know it as. Yeah.
Can you remember, like, sort of vaguely how old you were when you first stepped
I
foot
think
in
I
an
was
arcade?
like I said, it was probably about 3 or 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was still living in St. Louis at the time.
Okay.
And yeah, I do remember. I remember like those like the 80s like Star Arcade things with the crazy neon carpet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was using. That's what I remember. With all the black lights and stuff like that, and just I don't know, I was always mesmerized by it. Always.
Yeah.
Which is funny because my brother was always with me and it never captured him. He's 4 years older than I am. And it's never captured him the way it did with me. I don't know what it was, why I never captured him, but it completely got me. I was hooked from day one.
Yeah. That is interesting to think about. I have a brother too, but he's much older than me, so it's no surprise that we don't really share the same interests. But
But yeah, my brother was only like 7 or 8 at the time. He's like prime time for it. I mean, don't get me wrong, he plays games, but he's like nowhere near
yeah.
like what I was doing. He was very He's more like a casual player. Like I'll play every once in a while.
So what do you think was the difference?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know
Yeah.
what it was, but man, I was hooked on playing like Space Invaders and stuff, especially like when we'd be at home. I had vivid memories of playing a lot of Space Invaders on my 2600, and then I would play Combat with my dad, which is like a 2-player game. It's a 2-player only game, and it's got like a bunch of mini games where you could be like tanks and you're just trying to kill each other or biplanes or whatever. And I always remember him kicking my ass at it, but it was so much fun.
So it was a versus game.
It's a versus game, yes. I
Okay.
never really thought about that. That's one of my fondest memories when I was really young playing games, was playing with my dad, and it happened to be a versus game.
Would you consider your brother a competitive person?
No, not really. I mean, don't get me wrong. In like the mid 2000s, he played a lot of Counter Strike with me.
Oh, okay.
So he
Yeah.
has a little bit, but I don't think he takes it nearly as serious as I ever did. Like when we went to the arcades and played like fighting games, he never really learned.
Yeah, maybe that was the difference. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe you were competitive, a little bit more
Yeah,
competitive.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just never thought about till now with the whole combat thing, that the whole versus concept was just like instilled in me from the very beginning. Because even then, like even though I didn't understand it when I was young, because when it came out, I was only like 5 years old. Like Karate Champ, I thought was interesting, and then I loved, because I was getting older. I was about 8 years old. I loved Yi Kung Fu.
Never heard of
from
that.
Konami. Yeah, Yi Are Kung Fu. It's a one-on-one fighter, but it's only one player at a time.
Okay.
You only play against versus the computer, but you're going to be one character, and you go against like 8 different characters. So this really set the stage, right? And you had a bunch of moves too, and you had to use specific moves that are high, mid, and low to get
Mm.
around certain moves. And I was so hooked on that game. Uh, I remember, like, it was cool because I got so good at that game. I was 8 years old, so I was like 1986, 1987. And after you beat all the characters, the game will loop back to the first opponent again, and I could stay on that machine for hours on one quarter. So, we always talk about like us old arcade guys. The reason why we get good at fighting games is because we want to spend less money.
Yeah.
That was really like my first taste of like I don't want to spend money. I'm just a kid, so I'm a master of this game.
I think when people get exposed to video games, maybe it helps us recognize how competitive we are.
Right, right. I just thought that was crazy though. That it's just like and then Street Fighter One comes out with the big ass hydraulic buttons,
Yeah.
the pressure sensitive buttons. And I think I was 8 years old when I came out. I'm having to use my elbows. I'm like on the buttons, trying to get the stronger attacks out. And that game was awful. But there's something about it, It's like you go up to the cabinet, someone else is playing, and I want to kick him off the cabinet. And then the magic of like, how the hell did he just throw that fireball and stuff like that, right? That took like half my life. Like, how do you do these like hidden moves? It just completely captured me. So I'm layered in, like I'm already thinking about playing against other people. And then all of a sudden I'm drawn towards these games where they're one-on-one fighting, Cry Champ, ER Kung Fu. And then Street Fighter One comes out and now I'm like playing against someone else and it's just reinforcing that idea. And then now you got special moves and it's reinforcing it even harder because back then, you didn't have internet and you're always talking about, you playing on Nintendo and stuff and all the secrets. And you get like really into that stuff. And that just took it to the next level right there.
It's so funny, like, this is sort of a tangent, but when I think about those early ports of Street Fighter, as kids, we didn't really care much about being arcade perfect, stuff like that. Going back to your point, right, about how much money do you have going into this arcade? It was really all about saving money. Like the fact that I could play this game, and again, for any of us, that are from this generation and we're into Street Fighter, it's hard for me to describe, especially to younger people, like just how ubiquitous Street Fighter 2 was, like just everywhere, in
It's
terms
everywhere.
of just
Bro,
whew.
I remember going to my local arcade. It was a huge arcade. And I was gonna go there because like my mom was shopping and I didn't want to do shopping with her. So I was like, she gave me a couple bucks. And I was expected to go play a couple games of Street Fighter One. And this is a 91, 4 years after the game came out. And play some other games. And next thing you know, I see this Street Fighter 2 cabinet. It's like, whoa, there's a sequel. And I'm seeing everyone playing as like Chun-Li and stuff. I'm like, what is this? Dude, it's the most amazing experience. I wish I could experience again for the first time. I just jumped on it. I was like, I thought that was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. I I I couldn't get it out of my head. And then I went there the next weekend, and next thing you know, they got 10 of them. And which I've never seen any arcade do that before.
Wow.
And there were crowds at every single one. And I just like, man, you're just everyone's trying to figure out like how to do the moves and all. And I remember I was trying to figure it out. And like, so how do you do the move? They're like, oh yeah, you start at the stick, you start at back, and then you do basically just told me to do like a whole tiger knee motion and all that just to do a fireball. As like people hadn't figured out the exact motions yet. And it was just magical, bro. And then just the fact that, you beating people, running the machine, because this is the first time we had seen lines on a game that was competitive. There was no competitive. I mean, you play Street Fighter One, there may be a couple people on, but it was just like you beat them once or twice, they're gone. No, these guys kept coming back, and it's just an endless line. And then once you start staying on the machine, man, what I was like, because I'm 12 years old when this game came out, and because it came out right around my birthday, and I'm just like, holy crap, dude! Next thing you know, I'm like staying on the machine off one quarter for like an hour. I'm like this is it right here. And then I'm sending them. I send a packet to the token machine or whatever, you know. And dude, that was just the best feeling, bro. Oh my god! Like people today don't understand like how insane it was, and it's like you said, you know, the how ubiquitous it was. It was everywhere. Every 7-Eleven you went to, every laundromat you went to, every Circle K, every place had it. And then, you know, we get on Super Nintendo, and yeah, it was great. I loved it. And I thought, like, man, now I have to spend money again, but there was something missing. And what was missing is that I didn't have the arcade and have all these people to play. I only had like if I had a buddy come over, and usually their skill level wasn't very good, you know. So I it didn't stop me from ever going to the arcade. It was just something I could play during the week when I couldn't go to the arcade.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because right around the time that Street Fighter 2 came out, arcades were already on the decline. It's interesting to look back on that time and the rise of the console. And it's funny that you mentioned how the home release port of Street Fighter 2, at least for you, didn't discourage you from going to the arcade. That was the same for me. Like for me, the console version was a way for me and my friends to like practice and like, you know,
Yeah,
or like, you know, oh, this is how you do these moves, and then go to the arcade, and then so yeah, it's interesting to think back on like what console meant to us, like the players that were around at the time. And yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we were
Plus,
young though
plus,
too, right?
yeah,
There were grown men playing at the time, and I'm sure they recognized the stark differences between the port and the arcade release. But for me, like you said, you were like 11, I was like 9, 10, going on 10. You know, we didn't care. We just
you know
loved the
what?
fact that we could play at home. Yeah.
When I remember we figured it out early on. I was like, man, this version, I kind of like this version. Guile kind of sucks in the Super NES version because all you have to do is jump light kick and it beats all of his flash kicks.
Yeah.
And for some reason they completely botched that move. I'm like, hey, I can fight him now, right? But I mean, the other big thing is that too is that you know Champion Edition came out right when the Super NES version came out, and God, dude, what an upgrade!
Yeah.
That was just a massive upgrade, and we had never seen anything like that before. Just arcade culture, whatever, an upgrade. Like, what is this? Right? They sold us the same game again, but like way better,
Yeah.
like infinitely better. And that was crack, bro.
Yeah.
That was absolute crack.
The first patch, or the first, you know.
Yes, yeah, yeah. What was funny is that game was more popular than the original.
Yeah.
They sold more, and
Yeah.
you found that even more places than the original. It was so crazy.
I don't know why, but like when I think about CE, the first place that comes to mind. I grew up in SoCal,
Mhm,
in Monterey Park,
mhm,
and they had a CE machine at a Shakey's Pizza,
mhm.
and
Probably
that's
in a Z-Back Dynamo, red Z-Back Dynamo, probably, or Big Blue.
yeah. I think it was a Dynamo,
Because
and
those are the only ways you ever saw it. The Big Blue, because the Big Blues came out with Champion Edition.
uh,
That's when the Big Blues was brand new. Or if you were like at a 7-Eleven where they'd be in those red Z-Back
mm.
Dynamos. Man, one of those two.
now
Classic, dude.
now this might just be Mandela effect, Scott,
Mhm.
but since I have you on here, you know,
Yeah.
again, you're one of the true OGs of the scene, a real historian. You mentioned Champion Edition, and again, I lived in Monterey Park, and maybe, you know, it's similar to where you grew up.
Mhm,
You know, Street Fighter machines were everywhere, arcade machines
mhm,
were everywhere, not just at the arcades, laundromats, convenience
mhm.
stores. We called them liquor stores where I
Yeah.
was from. Um, I could have sworn that in some places I saw a version of CE, but it just looked off. Like
Oh,
it,
the Rainbow Edition?
I don't know if no, it wasn't Rainbow Edition.
Well, okay, let me tell you.
I could have sworn, and maybe it was a Mandela effect or something, but I could have
Okay.
sworn I've seen versions of CE where it just looks off, where it's almost like it looks very World Warrior, but with like the bosses and stuff, and I saw these in machines, and maybe I'm just
Okay.
misremembering it, but
So I mean, right. So you say it's not Rainbow Edition, but here's the thing. There's a lot of different hacks that came out of Taiwan.
yes, yes,
Rainbow Edition ended up being the most popular one, which is the one where you hit start, you could just cycle through all your characters,
yeah, yeah,
and then you're doing air fireballs and all the wacky stuff, right? And then there's other versions that are similar that does other wacky stuff, right? And I have come across versions of CE that were definitely more grounded.
hmm,
There were definitely tweaks,
yeah,
and you can find them. You can find them on on emulators and stuff. They've been dumped that are just like very modest changes,
hmm,
very minor hacks. So maybe that's one that you saw. It was
yeah,
just slightly different. Like maybe the fireballs are a little faster or a little slower. There's just like really slight tweaks. And I remember back in 2009, I remember me and Cigar Bob, we went to a Filiberto's and they had a CE cabinet. And I'm like, oh, let's play. And even then, we were like, whoa, what is this version? It's like plays really well. It doesn't feel broken.
but it's not
It
CE.
doesn't have it's a CE hack, but it's not playing like CE.
Yeah,
But it doesn't play broken. It seems like someone went in like and like tried to create their vision of a better CE, you know?
yeah,
So I'm wondering if maybe that's something you may have saw.
yeah. I don't
And
know.
you couldn't cycle through the characters. You could there was no immediately broken stuff.
Yeah,
There was no like throwing fireballs in the air or anything. It just seemed tweaked.
hmm,
I don't know. I couldn't explain that one. I was like, huh. So I never saw that when I was young. I only saw rainbow editions everywhere,
hmm,
popping up at like dollar theaters and stuff like that. And I mean, there's a huge story about around that. I don't know if you got ever watched that new documentary called "Here Comes the New Challenger."
yeah,
Oh, dude, that's a great documentary, and it talks about that bootleg.
yeah. And
Yeah, it's
how it kind of like uh well, I don't, the narrative is that it kind of sort of forced Capcom to make hyper fighting.
yeah, it forced them to make hyper fighting, which created a problem because they were making Super Street Fighter 2 at the same time
Yeah,
when they were making hyper fighting, and the speed fucked everything up. And but what was cool is that I didn't know that instead of stopping the bootleggers, they just made a deal with those that they wanted a percentage of all the sales of all the bootlegs. I was like, oh, whoa, that's crazy.
what are your thoughts on ST? Actually, next year is pretty momentous. It marks a couple of anniversaries.
Yeah,
25th anniversary of Third Strike, but also the 30th anniversary of ST.
let's
And so,
see.
yeah,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on ST?
I I think it's a classic game, but I don't pull any punches. That game is degenerate as hell.
What do you mean by that?
I hate the conversations, and we were dealing with this one just now with Street Fighter 6. Ah man, I remember, man, these games just don't have footsies like the old games. So I'm like, really? You mean like ST, the game where Vega just wall dives you to death? Balrog has low rush punches that are plus on block. Old Sagat that just smothers you with tiger shots. And I'm just like, bro, it's like all these games have bullshit, man. It's just like, I don't know, man. It's just true footsies. I'm just like, dude, I hate it when people say that. It
Yeah,
drives me nuts, man. Because every game, it's just like, even like Third Strike, you got guys like Yun. It's just like footsies. What's that? I'm just gonna dive kick your face in
yeah,
and activate. You know what I mean? Or urine. I'm just gonna like shoulder charge ages. I don't care.
yeah,
You know. But anyway, to go back to the game is super cheap. The game is cheap as hell, man. It is one of the cheapest games. But like a lot of games, there's a charm to it, right? It has issues. It has every stage plays different speeds. The way they handled turbo speeds in those days, it required frame skipping, and sometimes the move could be 3 frames, sometimes it could be 4 frames, sometimes it may eat your input. Sometimes you may have this amount of input leniency on a move, but then the next time you do a DP, it has less leniency and you may drop it, you know? Uh, just stuff like that, right? It just a lot of wonkiness back then. And that game has its fair share of weirdness, but it's still a high skill game, regardless of all the BS. It's just like any game. It all comes down to the BS you prefer. But I think it's a great game. It's not my favorite by any means, but I respect the hell out of it. And I also respect, much like the Third Strike scene, that the fact that the scene is still going.
So let's talk a little bit about Third Strike. You said that Super kind of soured you on the Street Fighter series, and so what was kind of your next sort of love or passion as far as a fighting game?
Oh, it was definitely MK and KI,
Mhm,
and a little bit of Tekken on the side.
mhm.
And then Action versus Street Fighter was like that was my big return back to Capcom,
Okay,
but it was just Action versus Street Fighter really until Alpha 3.
what is it about the game that kind of
You know what? I was on X Band one day I was playing KI and X Band, and there was like a newsletter when you log in, and it talked about how Action versus Street Fighter just came out in the arcade. I'm like, excuse me? And like X Men was pretty huge at the time, the cartoon and everything on Fox and all that. And I'm like, X Men versus Street Fighter, like what? I just like what? What are you talking about? So I went to the arcade and shit, there it was in a big blue, and I'm like, dog, this is fucking ridiculous looking. And seeing air combos and all that, you just stuff you never seen before. But that's what got me back into Capcom side of things. And eventually that led to Alpha 3. But I had to wait a little bit after that game came out to be able to experience it because I was in the military.
what was around the time that you entered the military? Around what year?
97.
Okay.
Yeah, June 97.
Hmm.
3 weeks after I graduated high school.
Yeah.
Or 3 days. I'm sorry, 3 days after I graduated. Graduated, went to basic.
What branch of the
Yep,
military?
Army. Went straight to Germany.
How was that experience?
Oh, it was great, man. I loved it.
Play
I
any
loved it,
uh
man.
play any
Yeah,
Street
man.
Fighter out there? Like, was there any
It wasn't a
fighting
lot. It was a
games?
lot. Like I brought my Saturn with,
Uh-huh.
to play, and the big thing is we had a bowling alley on post, and they had Tekken 3, and I was getting into Tekken 3 before I left for the military. I was getting into it. I wasn't really into Tekken at all, but Tekken 3 was so sick, and I really got into it. And it was the only game that I was interested in. I was at the bowling alley, but there would be people that come up and play. And, usually kids. It'd be like a soldier's like kid or something like that. Just in the neighborhood. But then there would be some soldiers that come up and play, and there was some that are pretty decent. And so I stuck with that, and then I got Alpha 3 on the PS1. I imported that, and then like one of the guys I befriended playing Tekken, we played a lot of it. I had no idea what I was doing though. I was still playing Fireball, Uppercut, Hyper Fighting style, and I hated the game because it did no damage. Like, what are these fireballs doing? Like 1 pixel damage, and it just didn't make sense to me. And I had to get a crash course in that game eventually when I came stateside. But I hated that game at first. The game I love the most is the game I hated the most at first.
I want to go back to when you enlisted in the military. You went to Germany in '97. Uh,
Mhm.
when I think back on it, a pretty interesting time. Not just in the FGC, but just in the world in general.
Mhm.
You're coming into a country that's just a few years removed from just being reunited, and also just in terms of FGC, you kind of left, when the FGC kind of really started to like develop
Yeah,
this kind of self-awareness, right? As a community. And so
yeah,
like when
yeah.
you went to Germany, like did you ever like try and keep touch with what was going on out here, or did you like, cuz you're one of the few people that are still in our scene that were, sort of part of, that time where the FGC just kind of was born. And so Yeah, I just kind of wanted to know what your
Yeah.
experience was.
So before I left, because my parents bought me my first PC when I was like in like 95,
Hmm.
I want to say. And I caught wind of the news groups really early on through a friend of mine that was more technical than I was at the time. And I did find alt.games.sf2, which is where, everyone posted about Street Fighter across the US, right? That's where they have like Sterling, John Choi, the Cannons, all of them. They were all posted there. I mean, that's how B3 got started, right? They formed it from there. I knew about it, but I was a lurker. I didn't really post. Um, but when I went to the military, when I went to Germany, I didn't really have much access to the internet. Um, for a long time, I didn't have a computer, and phones and internet access out there was really expensive at the time. And so I didn't really, so I was very disconnected through those couple years. Um, so I kind of fell behind. So all I could do was just play locally. I was basically blind to the outside world for those 2 years.
Hmm.
And it was when I came back stateside at the beginning of 2000 is when my eyes opened back up.
Hmm.
And then I had to play catch up.
Hmm.
You know, I had to play catch up at like Alpha 3 because that was a big game. Marvel 2 was coming out. CVS 1 was coming out. When I came back stateside, I went to North Carolina. I was stationed there for until the end of 2001. So I got my Street Fighter roots back for playing in North Carolina. That's almost like a second home to me. Their FGC is like a second home. So you got Automatic and all those guys out there, and those guys helped get me back up to speed of what I missed in the last couple of years. So it's a combination of the North Carolina scene and SRK getting me back up to speed of what I missed the last couple of years.
As someone who grew up in SoCal, I've been playing fighting games since a pretty young age. But as far as competitively, I came pretty late in the game as well. Like around the time that you went to Germany, like
Mhm.
graduating from high school, and now it's college. You have a little bit more freedom. My friends and I get to go to like other places, and that's when we first started going to Southern Hills. And yeah, I think it might have been my best friend who told me about Southern Hills. I
I
have
think
to.
that's cool that at least you got to experience it before it shut down.
Oh yeah, it was. We would go. My friends and I would go. But we were still very casual players. But,
Mhm.
we just started going to Southern Hills Golf Land like around the time that the FGC started to form, and that was the first time where I saw people with cameras at the
Oh,
arcade,
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
camcorders,
Hmm.
filming Marvel,
Uh,
and and so it was definitely just kind of eye opening, and that was kind of my sort of introduction to like the larger FGC when I first went to Southern Hills, because that was one of the hubs, right? Southern Hills,
yeah.
Camelot,
I mean
Sunnyvale,
that,
and Cali. Yeah.
but Southern Hills, that's a hell of an introduction.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's like the introduction of all introductions, right?
Yeah.
Because it was all Southern Hills
Huh.
or Chinatown Fair,
Yeah.
and yeah, man, you got blessed with that one.
Yeah. So when you come back, the FGC is starting to develop and gain momentum. A couple of Battle of the Bays already happened. The first Evo was 2002, and so when you came back and you saw all these things going on, like what were your thoughts like at the time, or was it just, oh wow, now I have a bigger stage and now I can compete and now there's more people that I can, or what was kind of going through your mind when you came back, and because you said you had to play catch up, so you saw how like the scene has grown. Like what were your thoughts on that?
Dude, when I learned about when I saw like B3 or at least was reading about it, I'm like, dude, this is so sick. And then like, B4 was getting ready to happen, which unfortunately I couldn't make that one. Just bad timing. But it's just stuff like that. And then like in North Carolina, they would start having some Marvel 2 tournaments at I can't remember the name of the mall, but it was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that happened to be one of Capcom's test sites.
Hmm.
So you had Sunnyvale as a test site for all the Capcom stuff, and then you had Charlotte. So we got lucky and got like Marvel 2 before anybody.
Mhm.
So it wasn't out yet, so we got to test it, and that was pretty dope. But they would hold tournaments there, so that was helping me really to get my bearings back into that stuff. I mean, I entered a lot of tournaments when I was a kid. During the Street Fighter 2 era, early Mortal Kombat era, and stuff like that. But I've been so far removed from it. I felt more of like a casual player at that point because even though I was playing in Germany, I wasn't playing enough or a lot. It was kind of more like a casual thing. So when I hear about the tournaments, like holy crap, man, people from across the country are coming to this, and now I got like a pretty dope local scene that I found in North Carolina in Fayetteville. I was like, dude, I'm all in. I was like, all right. I felt like it was back in the early '90s again. I'm like, I'm playing everything. We had an Alpha 3 scene, we had a Marvel 1 scene, we had a Tekken Tag scene, eventually a Marvel 2 scene, CBS 1. No Third Strike scene, unfortunately. We
Not
had
yet.
Third
Not
Strike.
yet.
Well, what was funny, we had Third Strike at every arcade in that area,
Uh-huh.
but no one played it.
Yeah.
No one played it. We played like every once in a while. There was one dude, his name was Josh. This guy, no one liked him. He was the corniest dude, right? So he would always be in the arcade by himself playing Third Strike, and he would just get Master Street Fighter effortlessly, like every character. He mastered versus,
Wow.
but he wasn't that great of a player. I mean, we could go up and play him, and just I don't know how to really play Third Strike, but like could kind of give him problems. He was better, but like not by much.
Yeah.
But like he was also a reason why no one ever wanted to play Third Strike.
So let's talk about Third Strike. You had already mentioned that not, when you came back, you found yourself in North Carolina, and
Mhm.
there was an arcade, and they had a machine there, but not many people, played it. And so, what was it about kind of the game that, I mean, like you were saying, there were a lot of games, right? There were a lot of games for you to play, and how come
I played them
initially,
all, but that one. I played them
yeah,
all, but that.
how come?
Okay, my first impression, was when New Gen came out, and again, that same arcade that I was talking about that had Alpha 2 and Alpha 3 back in Arizona that I hardly ever had access to. I got to access it a couple times. We went there. They had one there when it was brand new, and it was on one of those big projector screen cabinets, which are dope. I miss those. And I, my first impression of the game was like, damn, this game is beautiful. And then my first impression also was, damn, this game sucks. It's like this game fucking sucks. It didn't make no damn sense. It was just like, again, it was that same problem. It felt so slow. And New Gen isn't a good game. It's even by today, it's still not a good game. You don't have EX moves and stuff. There's just not a lot to do with it, right? I mean, yeah, okay, you got infinites and shit like that. Got some really wonky combos because you could build meters so damn effortlessly in that game and get like 7 Shinsho supers in one combo. But anyway, I hated it. I hated it. I probably would have still kept playing it though, but again, I just don't have regular access to the game. And so when I went to the military, Second Impact came out. I never seen that Second Impact in the arcade. Never saw it once. Because by the time I came back stateside, Third Strike was already out. And again, I first saw it at North Carolina. I had it in like the 3 arcades that I frequented out there. They all had them. Just no one was playing. I would go jump on it every once in a while. Just there was no one playing it. And I didn't know enough about that was different to I was just like, Street Fighter 3, I didn't like it, so I'm like, whatever. And I'm not gonna play those because no one's playing it. If people were playing it, I probably would have played it anyway, but no one was. And then I bought it on Dreamcast because I just bought everything on consoles, right? I wanted to have them all, right? And I still didn't play it that much. yeah, it just didn't click with me. I hated the game. I hated it. And coming back to Arizona at the end of 2001, no one was playing it out here. No arcades had it. The only people that would play it was Jeff, which is Luke's Balls. He's one of the OGs. He was huge on Street Fighter 3. He got like I think he got fourth at Midwest Champ at Midwest MWC 1997. I think he got fourth behind like John Choi, Vi, and all that, and Second Impact. And then you had Sebastian, who used to go by the name Joe, the One Handed Terror. He was really good at Second Impact. So we had a couple of players here that were insane at Street Fighter 3. And then the Marvel 2 was going really huge. And then so I met like younger players like Too Tall. And because Too Tall was originally a Marvel 2 player, but he got the third strike bug from playing Luke's Balls, and so they would play a lot of third strike, but no one would really play with them. Like we would go to Cigar Bob's house because he would host all these tournaments and gatherings, and we played like every game. Like we just put them through a rotation, right? Every 2 hours or something, we put another game in. And then we would play with them, but they would body us. It was just those three guys. We could never beat them, but we just weren't into it. No one was into it. It's just something about the game. It just didn't click with me. And I played all these different types of games with different engines, feel, mechanics, and all that stuff. But for some reason, Street Fighter 3, I just could not get down. And I just don't understand what it was about the game that just didn't click with me. And then one day we were playing, and I was like, fuck, I didn't really want to play, but I was like, fuck it, they wanted to play. So I'm playing. And then I accidentally picked Remy. Fucking Remy of all people. And for some reason, it just clicked. It just clicked. All of a sudden, like that day, I'm like starting to get some wins on these guys that were bodying me before. I'm using like Yun and Ken, fucking top tier, right? And I'm like, I'm not getting nowhere. And then it was Remy that kind of opened the engine up for me. It got me to understand it. And that was right when that was right, like maybe a month before Evo 2002. We all know what happened to Evo 2002. Justin versus Tokido, Mester, all the shit that they were doing to us in that 5v5. And that just blew everything up. And then I was like, dude, this game's sick. And then I went full in on after that. It all just started to make sense. It just opened it up, and then I eventually went to Oro, and I went back to Ken, back to Shotos, and I'm like, all right, this game makes sense. I was like, all right, I understand now. I understand it now. It just took a long time, but I was in the camp that everyone else was back in the day. Well, US, they hated that game. No one liked that game, and I was one of them. And it just took a while. One game had a second chance. No game's ever had a second chance like that game has. Give me another game that's done what it has done. The game came out a financial flop. It's dead. DOA. No one likes it. And then, almost 4 years later, all of a sudden, it's the biggest game in the FGC. That's so crazy to me. What a man! I don't know. That's just, if that's not a story for a game, I don't know what is, man. That's amazing what it did.
We would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the parry, as far as the mechanic itself. Obviously, it's made a comeback, Street Fighter 6, albeit in a very different form than Third Strike. Because I know that for some players, the parry was was one of the things that really kind of either soured them on the game or sold them on the game. It's very polarizing. What's your kind of take on not just the parry in Third Strike, but sort of the legacy of the parry now that 6 has it now?
So I remember when I played like New Gen, I thought the parry was stupid because it didn't work. I don't know how much new gen and second impact you played, but parries don't work very well in that game.
Yeah, they work differently. Yeah,
They
and
work
and of
very
course, new gen.
differently.
And remember, new gen is basically not even finished. It's
Right,
basic. They didn't
right.
even. It's not even a finished
But even
game.
in second impact, the parries were not that
Yeah,
potent,
yeah.
right? And Third Strike is a completely different beast when it comes to the parries, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know if you saw it, but there was a video that was translated recently of Neo G, who was the game planner for Third Strike, and he talked about the progress of new gen to Third Strike, and he talked specifically about the parry because he talked about how it was strictly defensive and new gen and second impact, and he said it never felt good.
Mhm.
But he said when they were redesigning Third Strike, because they rebuilt Third Strike from the ground up, and he said he decided he wanted to make it more of an offensive tool. The original thought was not to parry and then like reverse things, right? Then that became the concept of Third Strike, and that's why it changed so heavily, right? But yeah, dude, it was the parry I thought was really cool. I thought it was super interesting. When I was first playing it, when I was really getting into it with Remy, I liked it. It was just a lot of fun. It's just the mechanic made you feel really good when you landed it. It was like when you play Street Fighter 2 and you learn how to Dragon Punch. And every time you do like a Ume Shoryu or something, or a deep anti-air Dragon Punch, it's clutch. It feels so good, right? It feels amazing when you do that. And then I got that same feeling with Third Strike every time you like parry, like get a clutch parry out, multi parry, where it feels so damn good,
Mhm.
right? But this has also always been my issue with Third Strike. I ultimately love Third Strike, but it also sucks when you just throw out a jab. And at the time when I was using Remy, Remy's got shit defense, shit stun, and then you just jab, and then next thing you know, you just got 100%
Mhm.
right on you, and that is the worst feeling ever, and it sucks.
Mhm.
Just because I threw out a jab and
Mhm.
it could have been a random parry,
Mhm.
you know, just a lucky guess, and now I die.
Well,
And,
remember.
and I think that's always been the
Yeah.
polarizing aspect.
Well, remember, Saber. Top Third Strike players don't guess parry; they buffer parry.
Yeah.
We buffer parries.
You always buffer, right?
But it's funny that you mentioned the low jab by Remy because I think because you are coming from going back to the point about Third Strike being so counterintuitive, you're coming from an era, where that might be okay, but like the answer
Mm-hmm.
to the answer to that solution, I don't know if you ever watched Frankie BFG, his
Mm-hmm.
videos. He has a breakdown of Piero,
Yeah,
and in
yeah,
one of the videos, he talks about how Remy's use LOV as pokes and use
yeah.
LOVs as moves where, like maybe the reason you press that low jab was, kind of to get someone off you or to respond to
Mm-hmm.
pressure. But that's
Mm-hmm.
so counterintuitive. Like you go to Street Fighter 2, you can't throw a fireball in that range,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
you
It doesn't
know?
make any sense.
So yeah, it really is interesting that you mentioned
And
that
and and
example.
and that's but then I go back to the positive, and that's also what makes Third Strike interesting again, is because like yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with its parry system, but you could play like other games and just kind of say like you play the Alpha 2, right? Or even yeah, we'll say Alpha 2. And using like Sakura, you get your, short DP out, right? And you just repeat the mix, right? Cross up, short DP. Non-cross up, short DP. Anti jump, low, short DP, right? And you just loop it until they die, right? But then at Third Strike, you can't really do that. You have to change it. You have to change your timings. You have to kind of randomize your play a little more, right? But a lot of it's just like randomizing your timing a little more. I'm gonna delay my button on this jump in just a little more. I'm gonna delay. I'm gonna delay crouch check. I'm gonna do all this stuff. to throw off the parry. And that gives the game this new layer of depth, this little nuance, right? Where you have to throw your timings off just a little bit. Because if you come just the slightest predictable, you die. Period. You're dead. Right? You can't just do the same thing over and over again. You're going to get your ass kicked. And you have to, and like you said, you have to think out of the box, doing unconventional things that would just be batshit crazy to do in other games.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to throw off the parry, the thwart of it, right? You're trying to you're working around this puzzle, trying to work around this mechanic, right? And not get clipped by it.
Mhm.
And I find it very fascinating, but I also find it frustrating.
Yeah. No, it is. It can be. It can
It's a
be.
polarizing thing. It's a
Yeah.
polarizing thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I respect the shit out of the parry because even if it may not be my favorite mechanic to deal with in all Street Fighters, because I'm gonna keep it honest. I love Third Strike. I think it's a great game. It's not my favorite. I have my issues with it, but I respect the shit out of it. And and I have a love-hate relationship with the parry, but the one thing that I absolutely love about those parries is that it creates unlimited scenarios. You have so come on, man. You've been hosting Jazzy Circuit. We've been watching Co-op Cup for years. There's so many unique scenarios that just cannot be replicated in any other game. Clutch parries out of nowhere, just like the most ridiculous shit. You look at the Daigo parry, for instance, right? It's just like in any other game, it's just like, good luck, bro. And this one's just like, holy shit. And it's just, we could play that game in 100 years and still see interesting dynamic scenarios out of nowhere because of that parry system. And I think that's what makes it so great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Street Fighter 6 has just come out. And like we were saying before, parries work. It's almost like Street Fighter 6 is an attempt to hedge your bets between second impact parry and third strike parry. Because as you were saying, one of the things that the developers were really unhappy about is, just kind of the parry mechanic itself and how it didn't really push the gameplay forward, like in a specific round. And so, like, you have like the regular parry in 6, which is purely a defensive measure, right? But then you have the perfect parry. And, going back to what you were saying, yeah, I think ultimately that's why Capcom put the parry back, because of that feeling. They want to they want to give new generations of players the feeling of what it's like to, again, parry, whether it's a guess or not, but even they're doing that in 6 too, right? Just buffering perfect parry in certain ranges, in case,
Well, like I guess in 3 now, or in 6, what we do is like, say like something is like -3 on block, right? Yeah. I do a move that's -3 on block. Your fastest normals in the game are 4 frames, right?
Yeah.
So if I just perfect parry to steal the turn, I'm gonna get a perfect parry if I just parry after I block this.
Yeah, that's similar to what Third Strike does. That's similar to what we do.
Yeah. It's similar. It is similar. Yeah. It is similar. I feel like it's just more common in 6. And you could tell, like, obviously they wanted to bring it back because there's a lot of love for parry when it comes to it's. Okay, let me backtrack. The parries, when it's got the infinite scenarios, it's great for spectators.
Yeah.
And we're in the world of esports now, and I think that creates a better look for spectators when you have this perfect parry. And they were very conscious about it. I think the teams that worked on 6 were very smart. I think they looked at Third Strike, and then they see like probably the things that people don't like getting parried, your jab getting parried and dying. So let's introduce a bunch of damage scaling, so the parries don't get out of control in any way, shape, or form. Right? We got to keep it grounded and not have that mechanic dominate meta, but have it to where you can still create some good moments. I've had some moments already in that game where I'm like, holy shit, that perfect parry just clutched me a win out of nowhere and stuff. And it gives me a similar feel to Third Strike. It's not as good as Third Strike because it's harder to be fair, Perfect Parry is a maximum 2 frame window, whereas Third Strike, the parry window is a lot more lenient, but I feel like you also have to, press forward at
And
Third Strike.
there's high and low parries.
And there's high and low parries and stuff. Yes, exactly. And then you have the tricky stuff, right? Back, like you do, you're in, you got both ways, and stuff. So it's not as wild, but I think they struck a pretty good compromised balance, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So I love seeing it back, but I love seeing it to where it's not it's not the main showcase, but it is there,
Mhm.
and it's going to come through sometimes. It's a really dope scenario, but it's never going to be on to the level of Third Strike when it comes to that stuff. It just won't.
And but that's okay.
It can't, and it's okay.
That's
And
okay.
it's okay, but I mean, it is playing an homage to Third Strike. I mean, Six is playing an homage to a lot of games.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that it's back. It's not like Five where it's like, yeah, Ryu and Alex, they have these parries, but it's not even the same.
Hmm.
They're just like they're shadows. They're just wannabes. And I feel like Six they got it right. I think
Hmm.
they did really well with it.
Yeah,
So
this is actually a pretty good segue to the next thing I wanted to talk about, and that's kind of the future of these retro fighting game scenes. Uh,
mhm,
there are lots of games throughout the history of the FGC, and a lot of those games continue to be played. We
mhm,
mentioned how in Evo 2023, there's going to be a community showcase tournaments.
mhm.
Third Strike, the third most entrants, just behind Guilty and I think Strive and was it Melty? I think
No,
Melty,
no. Yeah,
Strive,
Guilty Gear Exerd was number one. And then
yeah,
yeah, I know Third Strike was like
third.
top or something like
It
that.
was three, yeah, and then ST
Yeah.
was just behind.
ST was like right behind it or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the, kind of
I
on
have
the
lots of
future
thoughts.
of the retro fighting game community, and there are obviously different games, different scenes. Some of those scenes still have thriving competitive communities: ST, Third Strike, VSAV. Um, just kind of moving forward as someone who's been there since the beginning. What's kind of your vision, or how do you see these older the communities for these older games moving forward?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm a lover of arcades. I mean, I'm sitting in front of an arcade cabinet right now. Um, I love cabinets. I love it. But I'm also very realistic, and I appreciate all the hard work everyone does, like you guys. Let's get all the boards together, you know, get all the cabs together, maintenance and whatever. But eventually, those options are going to go away. We just can't. CRTs aren't made anymore. Eventually, we're going to run out, and Fightcade is really big. You're going to start getting these younger players that don't play on a stick, or they don't play on a Japanese stick, or they just want to play on their own stick, right? And I think, and it's not just the Third Strike scene. I see it with other scenes too. Hell, we saw it with 37 Reloaded last weekend. I don't know if you paid attention to what happened there. Um, in order to evolve and keep these games alive, you have to adapt. And I think one of the problems a lot of these scenes have is they gatekeep a little too hard. Nah, bro, we have to play on a cabinet. You have to play on the sticks here. And older back in the day would have agreed, but these days, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. And I think we need to start finding new ways to preserve, right? Luckily, we're starting to get better tools to be able to do that, right? Like, we hooked you guys up on your versus cabinets with the harnesses, the plug-in neon dam stuff, which I'm sure helped out a lot. I don't know how much I don't know how people on the scene are using it. If they're using it a lot, I don't know. What could you tell me on that one?
Yeah. Like you were mentioning, uh, as far as this whole input device conversation goes, and I can only speak for the Third Strike scene. And I'm not saying that you were accusing a specific scene of
No,
gatekeeping
no,
or
no, no,
anything,
no, no, no. I'm
but
not. I'm
you
not.
know, when I first got those harnesses from you, that was quite some time ago. I think
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was like when I first started Jazzy. I think
yeah,
when we first started Jazzy, we had this conversation.
yeah. It was pre-COVID.
Yeah, the conversation was almost kind of eerie because we were kind of predicting what was going to happen, But when I first started Jazzy, I personally, for me, I had no problem with, I knew the technology existed for quite some time already, at least until like I remember maybe as far back as like 2017, 2016, as far as, being able to use, those undammed decoders and figuring out how to hook them up to the cabs. So it's
Yeah,
been there for a while. I was very cognizant that in order to keep our game alive, we were going to need new players. But I don't know. I have a bit of a kind of nuanced take on this whole conversation. I think the question, all of us that care about the FGC should really kind of consider is when we talk about preservation, right? What are
hmm
exactly are we trying to preserve here? What does the Jazzy Circuit, want to preserve, right? Like, what does Tournament of Legends want to preserve? What does Vampire Arcadia want to preserve? We play these older games, these legacy games. What exactly are we trying to preserve? Like, when it comes to the insistence on arcade hardware, I agree with you. These things are material. They're going to eventually, go by the way of the dodo, right? Realistically, this is many years
it's down the
in
road. It
down the
is.
road,
It is.
and so that is definitely I think that's a point that's good when you want to sort of argue that for the need to adapt. But I also think that it's important that we also preserve the opportunity for younger players to experience what it was like, not just what it was like to play our games the way we experienced them, but also how the the highest level of competition is being played. Because here's a scenario. Say you take a new Third Strike player or someone new in the FGC. Doesn't care. It doesn't matter how old they are. They've never heard of Third Strike before. The first place they're going to play it, most likely Fightcade. It's not like they're going to have an arcade that they're going to go to play the game for the first time. They're going to try it on Fightcade. Maybe with any chance, they enjoy it, and then they start interacting with other people who play the game. When you onboard a new player, there are certain things that you do. One of those things is you direct them to footage. You direct them to the highest level of play. So like you get this new player and you're going to point them to footage of high level play. And as far as the Third Strike scene goes, right? What footage am I going to direct them to? Maybe as 5K replays get more popular, maybe I'll direct them to 5K replays. But that's not the footage I'm going to direct them to, am I, Saber? What am I going to direct the footage to?
Arcade footage,
Coop.
co-op cup,
Japanese footage. So yeah, so it's I think there's a way to I don't think it's either or. I think there's a balance. We
Oh
tried to
yeah,
strike that in the
absolutely.
finale. And unfortunately we couldn't because there was some technical difficulties. Jazzy spent a great deal of money to get these enough harnesses for all the cabs at Aki. But unfortunately,
Mhm.
because of some wiring complications, we couldn't
Yeah,
get them to work. But we tried, and
yeah.
moving forward, we have no problem, trying again. But I just think
I'll
that,
have to teach you another way to do it. I can
yes,
teach you another way to
okay,
do it. So, well, that's a
yeah.
discussion for the day, though.
but
Anyway,
but yeah, I just think every scene needs to kind of ask themselves, what exactly are you trying to preserve? And for at least for the Third Strike scene, I recognize obviously new players are gonna play on Fightcade and stuff like that, but if you're also going to say, hey, this is the highest level of competition, like to me, like if a player, say a new player, they've never used a stick before, and they decide, they start playing Third Strike on keyboard, and they really love the game, and they're really competitive, they really want to win. Like to me, it's like I would feel bad because it's like, well, the highest level is Coop. That's what we're all striving for. But Coop's not going to let you use your stick, your keyboard. Coop's not going to let you. So I don't think we should discourage new players from at least trying stick. I think what happens is when we take these, sort of hyperbolic positions, and of course it's, if it's on social media, a lot of it's very fake, right? Because it's just discourse is designed to, sort of unfold in a certain way due to the platform. But like, I think players, especially new players, again, everyone has different reasons for why they don't use stick, but I don't think we should discourage people from using sticks. I definitely think we could strike a balance.
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree. Like, I love the fact that arcade culture is still trying to be preserved through the traditional ways, but it's hard. Like, I agree with what you're saying. I just feel like there's going to be some people that just they don't care about that, and I think they should learn about it at least and respect it. Learn about it. But yeah, there's going to be some people that are just very adamant about not wanting to play on someone else's sticks that they're not familiar with or whatever. And I think ultimately it's for the greater good as long as you give them the chance to use their optimal setup. Still play on the cab, whatever. They can still get the experience, I think. Go step it up to a cab, plunk it down a quarter or whatever, or in a tournament on a head to head. I still think they could still get that experience overall, even if they just got like a hitbox or a personal stick in their lap. I think we still get the experience overall. Now, I would say, yeah, if they ever wanted to go to Co-op Cup or something like that, then like I'd be like, yeah, you should probably learn how to play on this. I would encourage them to learn how to play on the cabinet because that gives you the biggest opportunities. That means you can play in any scenario, right? I will always encourage that for sure. Because if you're on a hitbox and you're playing in a scene or on a pad and you're playing in a scene that's mostly arcade based outside of Fightcade, you're going to run into those scenarios where you can't use it and now you're kind of gimped. So I get all that stuff, right? I totally get all of that. So I will encourage everybody to play on a stick for these arcade games. Not to use like the 3P button, the 3K button, 6 buttons. I tell people like try to stay away from all that. I try to keep them as pure as possible.
It's hard on 6
You
though.
know? Yeah,
Hard with
so I
6.
try I yeah.
But at least for retro
Okay, it's
games, right?
different, but I mean for retro games.
For
I
at
mean
least
for
retro
retro
game,
games.
yeah.
It's different for the newer games because they're designed around all that. But for the retro stuff, I tell them because in case they do have to play on a cabinet, you need to be ready for it. If you end up being like super good, you become good on Fightcade, you become godlike, and then all of a sudden you're like the best in the US somehow. And then you want to go try your stuff at Co-op Cup. How are you going to be able to do that if you're playing on a keyboard? You just can't.
Mhm.
But I do think we need to find ways to push the scene forward. I always appreciated that like when you were running Jazzy, like events could use 30th anniversary collection if they didn't have access to the board, even though they wouldn't be using that in the finale if they made it, but at least it was there. So people could participate. I think that was really important. Those boards aren't freaking cheap. Luckily, the community, the scene has a lot of the boards now. We have them personally now, so it's a lot easier than it was like 10 years ago. But the problem still is the cabinets. The cabinets is always the biggest hurdle, and firsthand, right?
Mhm.
Hauling those cabinets, it's a big pain in the butt. And the CRTs, big pain in the butt. The maintenance is a big pain in the butt. And I think we do need to, like, I'm not saying get rid of the arcade stuff. I don't want that at all. But I do want other scenes. I do want not just the third strike scenes, the other scenes to loosen up a little bit and be able to accept other formats as well. Let's say like when Third Strike comes out on Mister, right? I think everyone's gonna be hyped for that, right? And playing like Super Turbo on Mister, they embraced it because it's like damn near it's like 99, if not 100% accurate. Like people can't tell the difference. But the thing is though, is that like, all right, let's say third let's do a hypothetical, right? Let's say Third Strike is available on Mister and it's perfect. Let's just assume it's accurate. Speed, everything is accurate. The input lag is dead on, right? And then I decided to throw a tournament here in Arizona. But I'm not going to do it on arcade cabinets because that's a pain in the ass. I don't have the logistics for it. Now, if I hold it, but I also want the best players to come here. Am I going to get people like Daisuke, Frankie BFG, Exodus? Will all those guys come to this tournament knowing that, oh, it's not on arcade cabinet? And I think that's I understand why we're hesitant towards moving away from. I'm not saying move away from arcade cabinet, but also accepting the other platforms because it is obviously it's the game we know that is the golden standard, right? But I think we're starting to come across ways where we can get the same experience now, just in the gameplay form, but just contained in a different medium. And I think that's what we need to start eventually loosening up on. And I think it's for to don't want to mix up my words to help preserve the game even longer. I want to keep the arcade culture alive as long as possible. I'm with you 100% on that, but I think there needs to be alternate means as well. If someone says like, "Hey, I'm going to run it," a turn wants to run it on an emulator, and the emulator is super freaking accurate. He's got it dialed in. It's all dialed in perfect, right? But no one's going to want to go to it because of the stigma, even though it won't really make a difference. I think we need to learn to adapt a little bit, just to keep the game alive and keep it going. I remember Daisuke got the FGCOS, and then I remember because I'm in the Discord, and he was saying like he made the game too fast. Like the game, he has faster reactions on that than he does in the arcade, and we had to slow it down for him. We had to add input delay back in. So that tells you that we're getting there. We can actually have these really clean experiences without the boards. Which, if we have the boards, great. I mean, obviously, yes, let's play on the boards first and foremost, right? But I also want, there's not everyone has the luxury of having those boards, and then maybe they want to run tournaments, but no one's going to do it because the stigma is like, I'm not playing on a board. No one's going to show up. If no one's going to take it serious, and I think we need to be a little more open. I think both can exist, can coexist at the same time. Because I looked at like 37 Reloaded.
Mhm.
I don't want to go too deep into it, but there was drama. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah, it was something that had to
I,
do
I,
with
with
a set
controllers.
that Watson had
Hmm.
scheduled in hyper fighting.
But it was more specifically on hyper fighting.
Yeah.
And that was with Eggs and Bacon. Eggs and Bacon refused to play on the Big Blue,
Hmm.
but Watson wanted to play on the Big Blue.
Oh, okay.
So it was a conflict. They didn't have decoders on the Big Blue, and the rule was if you can't come to a determination, you have to default to the Big Blue,
Hmm.
and that sucks. That creates a problem because there was a few people there that don't play on cabinets. They just don't. Watson ended up just DQing himself, but that type of stuff sucks. And for the record, I understand both sides of the argument for in that scenario, but I think, especially when you got guys that are spending all this money, especially in 2023 money, flying all over the place. We want to make sure we got to try our best to accommodate them as much as possible to make it optimal for everybody, right? And
Especially the smaller retro scenes. You know, losing one player for Street Fighter 6 or the mainstream game is a drop in the bucket, but losing one player for some of these smaller scenes.
you know, and there was some tournaments have hesitations of even one to add like the undam converters, and then I'm just like, bro, like, so if I want to play on my stake and you're fine with the arcade cabinet, I mean, how does it affect you? You know, if it makes it even one person and makes their experience optimal, that's a win, especially when it doesn't affect the other player in any way. I think right now, I think whether it be cabinets or supergun, as long as everyone can play on what they want, I think right now should be the main focus for preserving. But down in the road in the future, I think we gotta start taking next steps. I mean, it could be a long time. It could be, oh, you know, there may be a tournament where like, yeah, we can't get CRTs. We're gonna have to use LCDs. We're gonna have to use HDs. But we got the tech where there's no lag. The refresh rates are so damn high that it matches like CRT image persistence.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of time, and then we can finally. I hate to say it, you know, as much as I love, we can finally ditch those bulky ass CRTs. I
Yeah.
actually kind of can't wait for the day when they really do get there with the image persistence. They say those monitors need to get to like 1,000 hertz refresh to really match a CRT's image
Wow.
persistence.
1,000 hertz? Yikes.
1,000 hertz. We're halfway there. We're halfway there, bro. We're halfway there. To
Yeah.
get don't get me wrong, like these newer monitors, like they're high refresh. Like I got a 360 hertz monitor with black frame insertion, and it comes really close to replicating a CRT with the image persistence.
Mm.
It's very convincing. You know, like I said, I want to keep the arcade culture alive as long as possible, but I also think there are other ways we can enjoy this game,
Mm-hmm.
even competitively.
I think Ailerus from Vampire Arcadia,
Hmm.
he tweeted recently, and I think Ailerus hit the nail right on the head. I too think maybe the control. I'm not saying that the input device debate is not important, but I
Hmm.
think it might be a little bit overblown. I think what really matters as far as sustaining our retro scenes is putting in the work of promoting
Yep.
your game,
Yes.
getting people to
Champion. You
learn
need
about the
champions.
games.
You
You know,
need champions for your games.
yeah,
You need someone that is your champion, like what you and Katie are doing. You guys are championing this game. You're putting the game on your back. You're advertising it to hell and back. You know, you're championing this game, and I think that's really important for these legacy games. You need that champion that's out there putting in that work. If you don't have a champion, the game isn't going to work. It's not going to stay alive. Like Alpha 3, it's not an Evo. We don't right now. We don't really have a champion for that game that's willing to put in that work.
yeah,
I don't have the time. I wish I could, but I don't have the time.
yeah.
You know, we just don't have those champions for that game. Even you could say the same thing about Alpha 2. We don't really have a champion for that game. I mean, Alpha 2 has the second lowest turnout for Evo this year. And then CVS 2, you would think would be higher. It's only got like 40 people. There's no champions for these games. Whereas you guys for Third Strike, right? You got VSAV, you got those guys, you know, that are really pushing the whole Vampire Arcadia guys, right? And then ST, you have Riz, you know, Tournament of Legends, you know, all those guys putting in that work, right?
Marvel's doing their thing. Marvel 2's doing
Marvel's
their
doing their thing right there,
yeah.
you
Marvel
know. I
3.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, these guys have their champions and they're really pushing it. They have a presence of some sort and they know how to push it. They're making these events dedicated to this one game. And I guarantee you, dude, if it wasn't for you coming with Jazzy Circuit, Third Strike would be nowhere near where it's at right now. Because I remember before you did Jazzy Circuit, these servers weren't getting these numbers at these majors at side tournaments. You think Evo would get almost 90 people if it wasn't for Jazzy Circuit? I don't think so. You have to have champions. I think that's what's most important. It's just like Alpha 3, it has a stain on its reputation because all people see is, oh, these infinites, But the thing is, though, the discourse you see from anyone that doesn't play Alpha 3, they're outside looking in on that game is just infinites. This game, Kusuge. And they think like, oh, the game's got no neutral and all that. That game is neutral heavy, bro. But we don't have, the closest we have to a champion to that game, unfortunately, is Version, but he's Japanese. There's that language barrier, right? And then I think the next closest was Kyokuji. Because he's super good at that fucking game. He's amazing at Alpha 3.
Mm-hmm.
And for a little bit, he was putting out content to help show people what is going on in the game. And then we were doing tournaments for a while where we can go sets without even busting out one VC. Or we're showing how to escape it. Escape the infinite setups, stuff like that. There was more to it, but we don't really have a true champion to show. But yeah, man. Oh yeah, that was another reason why I picked you on to begin with Third Strike, because again, agent.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I didn't know how it worked, I always thought custom combos.
Well, they're kind of, they're a little similar, when I look back on them, like in terms of how to keep them going and stuff. And I think the A thing started with Alpha 3. Like, I don't think it like everyone kind of associates it with Yun, right? And Evo and the juggles, but I am pretty sure it started at Alpha 3.
Did it? Well, maybe
I think
it did. Maybe
so. I think I heard it first.
Man, it's been so long, I don't even know, bro. But I do associate it with Third Strike as well.
Yeah, but I don't think that's where it came from.
Maybe it didn't, because maybe they were already doing it in Japan
and
it just carried over to Third Strike.
Yeah,
that could be it. But Third Strike, hey man, they the game can have that as one of the things. Why not, bro? Why not? Third Strike though. I one thing I didn't touch on with Third Strike that also I think what makes it a huge game, an important game, is I feel, and not a lot of people talk about this, and this goes along with how the game felt weird at first back in the day, how foreign it was, but honestly, that game, Third Strike in particular, not the other ones, really kind of set the stage for all the modern Street Fighters that followed. It really did. If you look at the stuff that you do in Third Strike, the meta-wise, you see it in all the newer ones, right?
Yeah.
Especially like 5 and 6 throw loops, shimmy. Anyone?
The walk back.
We've been doing that forever at Third Strike. Oh, let's card throw a couple times with Chun, not back fierce super your ass inside, right? Yeah. That stuff has existed ever since Third Strike. Third Strike really also it existed in other games, but it was in a more of a limited capacity. But I feel like Third Strike is really where whiff punishing became really huge. Like you were limited to whiff punishing a lot in games like ST. Alpha 3 you could whiff punish pretty well, but Alpha 3 also came out around the same time as the Street Fighter 3 series, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going through the same thing pretty much. But I feel like Third Strike really established a lot of things that are now commonplace in modern Street Fighter. Like that, the feeling of neutral, aside from just buffering, go forwards and shit and getting ready to super, But the feeling of neutral, I feel like is carried on in these newer games, especially in 6. I feel outside of Drive Rush, that neutral feels the closest to the Third Strike. That's a testament to the game, man. That's the legacy that it carries on. I think that game established a lot of current meta.
Well, I think we're gonna go ahead and cut it here, Saber.
I could have kept going.
Yeah, we do. But before we get
maybe we'll have to do a part 2.
Yeah, definitely.
dive way more into Third Strike. I know we're kind of
Yeah.
all over the place, but I know I could always go further in.
No, this was a really great conversation, especially, with someone who has played other games and, understands Third Strike, from that perspective as far
I
as,
think, yeah, because I think versus your other guests, I'm more on the perspective of I'm not the die-hard Third Strike player.
Mhm.
Because I think everyone you've had on here are just strictly Third Strike players. So I think I have like a different perspective.
Mhm.
And even though Third Strike may not be my favorite Street Fighter, it's up there,
Yeah.
and I have so much respect for it. I have so much respect for it as top players. So I think at least I have like a unique perspective on it.
Mhm.
I can understand, I can recognize its flaws. Just like Alpha 3 is my favorite game, I recognize its flaws, but I can still love it at the same time. No one's perfect. And that's what makes them perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Its imperfectness makes it perfect, right?
Yeah. We always have to remind ourselves that love isn't supposed to make sense. Right? I mean,
That's
think about it, right? Love actually
that is
doesn't make
fact.
sense.
It doesn't, man. I don't know why I love it, but I just do.
Yeah. We should
I
definitely
just do.
yeah, a part 2, maybe focusing on Alpha 3 would be cool. Maybe an Alpha 3 podcast. That would be awesome, Try to get all the alpha players and, just sit down and talk with them. That would be
Yeah, man.
that's kind of how this podcast started, you know.
Yeah, man.
Uh,
But I just want to say, man, I appreciate everything you do.
well, appreciate that, man.
Jazz, even though I didn't do anything this year. I'm glad that I left it in pretty good hands here in Arizona.
Mhm.
And but yeah, I just appreciate everything you guys have done. I think it's pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, we didn't even get to talk about the Jazzy event that happened, this past March. Like we didn't
Which
even
I
talk
missed.
about yeah.
That sucks, dude. I was so bummed, man.
Yeah.
I forgot that you were showing up to these, and I couldn't make it because work sucks.
Yeah.
And
What it is,
dude,
yeah.
I was really bummed because I was really looking forward to going
Yeah.
because I hadn't been able to play in months,
Mhm.
and I don't like playing Third Strike on Fightcade. So
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, but yeah, I was really bummed I couldn't make it, man. But I again, I appreciate that you showed up, showed support, showed love to the guys that are really that have taken the mantle here locally
Mhm.
and really taking it to the next level and all that. And I definitely appreciate you.
Yeah. All right, well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Once again, thanks Saber for coming by. It was
Anytime.
yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you about, your history and your thoughts on all of the games that you've played, including Third Strike. And before we get out of here, for people who are listening who want to know more about, your story and maybe want to even challenge you in 6 or any of these other games. Also, remember Saber is a Alpha 3 Grandmaster, and so
Alpha 2 as well. Alpha 2 as well.
Alpha 2 as well, and so and very nice in hyper fighting. I seen those links. So yeah, well, thanks again for the time, Saber. We'll definitely do this again, and until next time, I'll see you later, guys.